Good day with your major newscast. I'm Jessica Daw. First with the highlights. Guyana will be constructing a hospitality institute nearby several hotels that are to be built at Ogle East Coast, Demerara. A number of complicated surgeries has been completed successfully. In the region, Britain's Prince Charles has lamented the impact of slavery in an address to mark Barbados' transition to a republic. Globally recognized singer Rihanna has been declared a national hero of her native Barbados. The details of these stories and more in just a moment.
Advertise with us on News Talk Radio Guyana 103.1 FM for best coverage on programs on motivation, beauty and health, parenting and relationships, knowing your rights, and a variety of enlightening content, and get value for your money. Call our helpful staff today on 223-1056 or 223-1041 today.
Now for the news in detail. Health Minister Dr. Frank Anthony says 3 complicated surgeries have been performed in Guyana. He says these include the removal of the cancerous part of a liver, the removal of an adrenal gland, and the prevention of a rupture of the aortic artery in the heart.
These are all very complicated surgeries, and it's the first time in some instances that we're doing these types of surgeries. So I want to, on behalf of the ministry, extend our congratulations to all the surgeons, the anesthesiologists, the support staff who would have assisted in these very complicated operations, and we look forward to them doing these types of operations more on a routine basis as we see these types of patients. But it just demonstrates that our doctors here, they have the capacity to do very complicated surgeries and be successful.
Health Minister Dr. Frank Anthony. Guyana will be constructing a hospitality institute to train Guyanese for the large number of internationally branded hotels that are being constructed here. Minister of Tourism Onesh Waldron says the institute will be built at Ogle East Coast, Demerara. She explains that this area has been chosen because the Hospitality Institute will be close to the several foreign-branded hotels that will be built at Ogle. Several companies have purchased former sugarcane lands to build a number of hotels. The government's Department of Public Information has quoted the tourism minister as saying that the sod has been turned for several branded hotels expected to be completed by 2023 to 2024, which will see an additional 1,000 to 1,200 rooms. The non-governmental civil society organization, Article 13, fears that hefty fines and long jail terms will discourage persons from taking up certain jobs at the Guyana Elections Commission, GECOM. Article 13 made known its position about the government's proposed amendments to the Representation of the People Act. One of them includes a $10 million fine and a life imprisonment for the chief elections officer if he commits certain election offenses. But the recently formed civil society organization fears that if these proposals make their way into the law, they can have a chilling effect on the willingness of citizens to serve for a paltry sum as clerks on election day. Already leader of the Alliance for Change, attorney at law Kemraj Ramjatan, has said that persons could be scared away from taking up the jobs, leaving GECOM to hire persons of lower caliber. One of the nominees for the post of leader of the People's National Congress Reform, PNCR Aubrey Norton, wants to invest some of the properties of his party to generate income.
This party has a lot of assets, but we wake up and sell. Rather than taking those assets and put them to earn income. Under the leadership of Aubrey Norton and team, our party assets will be transformed into income-earning assets.
Mr. Norton's main rival for the leadership of the PNCR, Joseph Harmon, has similarly promised to make their party business-like. He is also promising to train party members how to manage money.
As a party, we are going to train our members across this country. We are going to train them politically. We'll train them in terms of leadership. We will train them in terms of management. We will train them in terms of local government. But most importantly, we intend to train them in financial literacy and small business development. One of the things I want to see this party do is to focus more on making our support base employers rather than employees.
His promises come on the heels of criticisms by the Minister of Culture, Youth and Sport that there are no black role models for young black Guyanese, especially in the generation of wealth. He also told the party faithful in Linden that if he is elected to lead the PNCR, he will spearhead the use of party property to generate wealth. Health Minister Dr. Frank Anthony says there is a growing number of pregnant women who are infected by the coronavirus COVID-19. In his latest update, he said the majority of the pregnant women are hospitalized at the Infectious Disease Hospital at Lilliandale, Greater Georgetown.
The point here is that the majority of the patients that we have at the Ocean View Hospital now are because they're pregnant and they're positive for COVID. And most of these patients are not vaccinated. So again, I think it's important that pregnant women get their vaccination. It doesn't matter which trimester, but they need to get their vaccination. The vaccines are safe during pregnancy. It does not affect the mother nor the child. So that's something that we're encouraging mothers to make sure that they get their vaccines.
He explains that of the 43 patients at the Ocean View Infectious Disease Hospital, 28 are pregnant. 4 of them, he says, were admitted there within the past 24 hours. The health minister, meanwhile, says nationally 66 persons are hospitalized with COVID-19, 15 are very sick and are receiving intensive care. Now for the news in the region. Britain's Prince Charles has acknowledged the impact of slavery on Barbados. He was early this morning speaking at an elaborate ceremony for the transitioning of Barbados to a republic, which means that the Queen is no longer head of state of that independent state.
From the darkest days of our past and the appalling atrocity of slavery, which forever stains our history, the people of this island forged their path with extraordinary fortitude. Emancipation, self-government, and independence were your waypoints. Freedom, justice, and self-determination have been your guides. Your long journey has brought you to this moment, not as your destination, but as a vantage point from which to survey a new horizon.
Prince Charles, however, says that Britain and Barbados will continue to share one space, the 54-nation Commonwealth of former British colonies.
Madam President, as your constitutional status changes, it was important to me that I should join you to reaffirm those things which do not change. For example, that the close and trusted partnership between Barbados and the United Kingdom as vital members of the Commonwealth, our common determination to defend the values we both cherish and to pursue the goals we share.
Barbados's President Sandra Mason, who was up to yesterday Governor General, told the gathering in her inauguration speech that Barbados has come of age.
Some were understandably fearful of how our inexperienced crews and passengers would navigate storm-tossed international waters. A sense of uncertainty surrounded the viability of our social experience and our economic well-being. Others voiced grave reservations about where our small bark would end up. But even in the face of the uncertainties and the unknown, we set aside our doubts and fears, and with hope in our bosoms, we committed to the journey, embracing the vision of a proud, strong, hard-working people, and we sailed forward.
And Barbados's Prime Minister Amor Motley announced that world-acclaimed singer Robin Rihanna Fenty is now a national hero.
My government has the distinct honor of recommending to the President, who has kindly and graciously accepted, that Ambassador Robin Rihanna Fenty tomorrow morning shall have conferred upon her the Order of National Hero of Barbados.
Rihanna's mother is Guyanese, and she is the niece of local cultural icon Alan Fenty. France's Minister for Overseas Territories is holding crisis talks on its Caribbean islands since Sunday. Reuters news agency reports that this is part of efforts by the government to defuse tensions after more than a week of unrest stemming from its handling of the COVID-19 pandemic there. Minister Sébastien Lecornu says he and his team will return to Paris hope to resolve part of the crisis and that calm will be restored to make way for open and constructive dialogue with all the actors. A plan for compulsory vaccination for health workers stoked a sentiment among the majority black population of Guadeloupe and Martinique of being excluded and marginalized from the mainland. The same measure had already been introduced on the mainland. The issue sparked protests and fanned long-standing grievances over living standards and the relationship with Paris. Protesters have insisted they should be allowed to make their own choices about health treatment. On Friday, the government postponed the requirement that public sector health workers on the two islands be vaccinated, but local officials have demanded more dialogue with the central government. A number of elderly persons in Antigua were this morning protesting outside the Social Security Board. Antigua Observer Radio spoke with a number of the persons who picketed outside the board, saying that they have not received any payments.
We come because we can't get no money. I'm on time. Because they get prepared for funeral suddenly, I go back in and phone one month to come out and beg that they should have get paid any money. It is disrespectful, it's wrong for people to put in work, and at the time when they're due a payout, they're unable to get that payout.
One of the picketers says he paid his contributions for 37 years, but he has not received any payments for the year. The picketing demonstration was organized by the opposition United Progressive Party. And lastly, in the region, the Bahamas government is actively considering putting in place a fixed date for general elections. This indication has come from Press Secretary in the Office of the Prime Minister, Clint Watson. More in this report from Eyewitness News in the Bahamas.
Prime Minister Philip Davis is considering fixed election dates. This according to Press Secretary Clint Watson. Now, during the weekly press briefing at the office of the Prime Minister last week, Watson said Davis was concerned about how the former Prime Minister handled the last election. And because of this, Davis is now thinking through the idea of a fixed election date. Former Prime Minister Dr. Hubert Minnis, ahead of the 2017 general election, promised fixed election dates, but that never happened in his term.
The Prime Minister would have spoken and expressed serious concern during the last campaign before we even knew an election date, how it was being used, almost like a only me know, you don't know kind of thing. And it was very disruptive in so many ways and forms. And it's led to him giving serious consideration. So I believe in another few months, we'll be able to speak definitively on it. I can tell you, though, in talking with the Prime Minister, it is under serious consideration.
Meantime, Executive Director for Organization for Responsible Governance, Matt Arbery, suggesting that the possibility of a fixed election date could be a step in the right direction for the country, strengthening its democracy and benefiting the country's electoral process.
We know that other Westminster systems of government have experimented with fixed election dates, and they've had mixed results. But for our context, we see that fixed election dates could benefit the electoral process. We see the opportunity both on the citizen side as well as the candidate side. We see that a fixed election date could create stability through more transparent timelines and parameters, which is vitally important when you think about needing to include all potential voters. And I think our last election reflected that there is definitely work to be done in this area. On the candidate side, a fixed election can also create more stability by giving the candidates more opportunity to develop and mobilize their efforts at a fixed schedule, knowing when they have to gather resources, when to deploy them, and when to access and outreach the citizenry. Again, I think this election reflected that there is some interest out there in having a more diverse group of candidates running in an election.
That was a report from the Bahamas' Eyewitness News. Here now is your international news from the BBC.
Hello, I'm Justine Green with the BBC News. A German court has sentenced an Iraqi man who was a member of the Islamic State group to life in prison for genocide against the Yazidi religious minority. It's the first genocide verdict worldwide over the IS atrocities against the Yazidis in northern Iraq. This report from Damien McGuinness.
The verdict has been called historic. Al-Jumaili is the first member of so-called Islamic State to be found guilty of genocide against the Yazidi people. In 2015, while living in IS-occupied Iraq, Al-Jumaili enslaved a Yazidi woman and her 5-year-old daughter. He mistreated them for months and chained the small girl to a window outside in the blazing sun, where she died of thirst. The girl's mother survived the ordeal and testified in court about her daughter's suffering.
The Ugandan army says it's launched an attack against the rebel group Allied Democratic Forces in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. From Kampala, Patience Odahere reports.
Uganda People's Defense Forces said the operations were carried out with Congolese allies against ADF camps, but did not give further details on the areas where they have been conducted. The DRC government also tweeted that the targeted and concerted actions against the group had begun. 2 weeks ago, the extremist group Islamic State claimed responsibility for a series of attacks just outside of the capital Kampala, at Kampala's Central Police Station and near Parliament. At least 5 people have been killed in these attacks, some of which were carried out by suicide bombers, according to the Ugandan police.
Thousands of people are taking part in a protest in Sudan's capital Khartoum against the country's military leaders. Reports say the security forces near the presidential palace fired tear gas to disperse them. The opposition had called for the protest despite a deal last week that reinstated Prime Minister Abdullah Hamdok and released most civilian leaders detained since October's coup. There's been strong opposition to Mr Hamdok's accord with the military. The Greek Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis has said that any citizens over 60 years old who don't get vaccinated against coronavirus will face monthly fines. The $113 fines will start being imposed from mid-January. The details from Mark Lowen.
With around 63% of Greeks fully vaccinated, the country is lagging behind the majority of EU members, and more than 500,000 of the over 60s haven't yet had their first dose. Greece has already brought in mandatory vaccine passports for most indoor venues, but today's announcement increases the pressure on those refusing to be jabbed. The Prime Minister, Kyriakos Mitsotakis, said he had been tortured by the decision, but that he felt a heavy responsibility towards the most vulnerable, even if it might fleetingly displease them.
World News from the BBC. The head of the World Health Organization says some countries are introducing blanket measures aimed at the Omicron coronavirus variant, which are not based on evidence or effective on their own. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus said these were penalising southern African countries that reported the strain. He said there were still many questions regarding Omicron, including its transmission, severity of disease and the effectiveness of tests and vaccines. Western powers and Russia have exchanged warnings over Ukraine amid continuing tensions over the build-up of Russian troops near the border. Speaking ahead of a meeting of NATO foreign ministers in Latvia, the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken told Moscow not to escalate the situation. His comments were echoed by the alliance's Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg.
There will be a high price to pay for Russia if they once again use force against the independent sovereign nation, Ukraine. We have demonstrated our ability to impose costs, economic, political actions.
President Putin warned NATO against what he called expanding military infrastructure in Ukraine, describing it as a red line. The far-right political commentator Éric Zemmour has announced he's standing in the French presidential elections next year. In the announcement video, he attacked immigration, saying it had made France's problems all worse. The most recent opinion polls suggest his popularity is dropping. President Macron is also expected to run for a second term. Astronomers say they've observed the closest pair of supermassive black holes to Earth ever detected. They say the two objects are in a galaxy 89 million light-years away, a fifth of the distance of the previously known nearest pair. And at 1,600 light-years apart, they're also the closest black holes to each other ever seen. They're on a collision course, set to merge into one giant sometime in the next 250 million years. BBC News.
And that was your international news. Here now is a recap of the highlights. Guyana will be constructing a hospitality institute nearby several hotels that are to be built at Ogle East Coast, Demerara. A number of complicated surgeries has been completed successfully. In the region, Britain's Prince Charles has lamented the impact of slavery in an address to mark Barbados' transition to a republic. Globally recognized singer Rihanna has been declared a national hero of her native Barbados. And that was your major newscast. I'm Jessica Daw.
This has been the news, compiled in the News Talk Radio newsroom. For ongoing updates, visit demerarawaves.com, and you can check facebook.com/demwaves and twitter.com/demwaves.